Welcome, everybody. Today's episode is going to be the first in a series of several episodes all about fermented foods. Fermented foods have been consumed in most cultures throughout the world for thousands of years, but sadly, this ancient knowledge was all but lost within a couple generations, and most people have no idea how to make their own fermented foods or why it's even important. So let's start with that. Why eat fermented foods? Well, the most obvious reason is for the probiotics, the bacteria and the yeast. And yes, you can just buy a probiotic, but whatever you're going to get over the counter is unlikely to have the quality that home fermented foods offer you, because the foods that you make at home and ferment yourself are freshly prepared. Whenever you see a probiotic and it gives a count of live bacteria, it's important to know that all of that is measured prior to the preparations to make it shelf stable to be shipped to the store where you buy it. It can be quite a long time from that point until it's purchased by you and then going into your body. And they don't have to and don't guarantee that at the time you consume the product, the counts will be anywhere near what they measured long before. Also, home fermented foods have a complex array of both bacteria and yeast, and you just can't find that in an over-the-counter product. Now, that doesn't mean using purchased products are a waste and don't do any good. It just means you're going to get the best benefits from home fermented foods. Fermented foods are connected to improved immune function and brain development and function. They support a healthy cardiovascular system, reduce risk of certain cancers, they offer anti-inflammatory benefits, and they can even help with asthma, eczema, and other conditions. So what's not to love? But the benefits don't just stop there. Fermenting grains and other foods make them easier to digest, and that can be very significant for the population of people living with feeding tubes, because many people who have a feeding tube also struggle with digestive issues. When you ferment a food, you're actually partially digesting it before you even consume it, so then that's less digestion that you have to do yourself. That can be easier on the gut. It also increases the bioavailability of various nutrients in the food, which means the person will be able to absorb those nutrients more easily. Whether you have a digestive disorder or not, getting the most out of your food would be beneficial to practically everyone. So, fermenting makes food easier to digest and the nutrients easier to absorb. And we're also going to be talking in the coming weeks about how to ferment your own grains. And of course, those are going to be cooked, which kill off the probiotic bacteria and yeast, and yet it's still very beneficial for the reason of the easier digestion and the easier absorption. And icing on the fermented cake, it's not hard to do at all. A lot of people get overwhelmed or intimidated by it, but it really only takes just a handful of minutes per day, so the benefits far outweigh the labor involved. The next few weeks, I'm going to be sharing options to have an ongoing fermented food source that you can use to ferment all kinds of other foods. There's a variety of options to meet different needs, and all of them are good options. All that really matters is that you pick what works for you. You don't need to do all of these. In fact, I wouldn't recommend doing all of these unless you're just really into fermenting. You can just pick one or two that sound like they'd work well for you and your situation. None of them are better than the other. They all just have different ingredients going in, like some use dairy, some use wheat. You may not be able to do gluten or dairy. There will be other options for you, so it really just depends on what you want to do and what's going to work for you. After we go through that, I'm going to be sharing methods and recipes for using those fermented foods in cooking to aid digestion and increase nutrient absorption. So today I'm going to show you how to make kefir. Now, you've probably seen kefir for sale in the store, and it's important to know that the kefir you buy in the store is not actually kefir. Those are basically yogurt drinks with added probiotic strains, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad for you or that you should not use them or that they don't have any benefits. They definitely don't have the benefits of real kefir, which can only be made at home. If you do buy store-bought kefir, I do urge you to make sure that you check the sugar content. Many of those kefirs have a huge amount of added sugar, so just check for that. Homemade kefir has a vast array of probiotic bacteria and yeast that you could never find in a store, and it's very easy to make. The first thing you need to make kefir is kefir grains. This is not actually a grain. They're little white lumps that ferment the milk for you. A lot of times you can find them listed on like Facebook Marketplace. Kefir grains grow, so as you make kefir, sometimes you have to remove just a little bit or it's going to over ferment your milk. So people who make kefir almost always have extra kefir grains to either sell or give away. I'm going to include a link to the Kefir Lady in the description below. She always has kefir grains. I've ordered from her several times. She's such a nice person, and she even sends you a manual letting you know exactly how to make the kefir with the grains. So what I have here is some already fermented kefir that's ready, a couple of jars, a strainer, and some milk. Let's talk about the milk. We use goat milk because my son Bradley doesn't tolerate cow milk, and also I just like goat milk better, and Bradley seems to as well. But you can definitely use cow milk. You can use skim, whole, 2%. It doesn't really matter. The main thing is to not use ultra pasteurized milk. Normal pasteurized milk is fine, but do not use ultra pasteurized or it won't work. Also, you cannot use lactose-free milk because the bacteria and the yeast eat the lactose for their food, and it's that process that results in the fermentation. If you have a problem with lactose, kefir can be made lactose-free, which I'll share in just a minute. So what I'm doing here is just pouring the kefir through a strain, and you can see those lumps coming out. Those are the kefir grains. So you want to strain those out so you can add them to your jar for the next day. And you can see there, I've placed them in a clean jar, and I'm just covering them with milk. Then I cover the top with a paper towel and a rubber band. Whatever you cover with, you just want to make sure that air can get in and out, but of course you don't want bugs or dust or things like that getting inside. And then I just tuck it away in a corner and leave it there until the next day. And that's really all you need to do. Now I do want to mention that kefir already has a very low lactose content. So a lot of people who are lactose intolerant can drink it as is. My son Bradley has a very extreme lactose intolerance. He cannot have it at all in even a small quantity. So here's what I do. I pour his portion into a jar, and then I add some liquid lactose drops. I set that in the fridge, and he's actually going to drink that kefir tomorrow. The kefir he's drinking today, we made yesterday. What those lactose drops will do is just get rid of all of the rest of the lactose in 24 hours, so you'll have a truly completely lactose-free beverage. Since it will be in the refrigerator, those bacteria and yeast become a little dormant. They don't have to eat so much, and so it's okay that the lactose is all being removed at this point. But you definitely need the lactose there at the beginning during the fermentation process. As I mentioned, your kefir grains, they're alive, they grow. And so every once in a while, you'll notice that's getting a little over fermented, meaning you might see some clear liquid at the top. That's safe to drink, but it can be pretty strong. So what you want to do is just take out a small portion of your grains. I'm putting them into milk here because I actually know somebody who wants some kefir grains, so I'm saving them for him. But normally you can eat them, you can throw them in the blender. Sometimes I give them to the dogs. They're totally edible. So just do, you can throw them away if you don't want to eat them or consume them, but you can if you want to. It doesn't really matter. And like I said, some people sell their leftover grains on Facebook Marketplace. You could get yourself a little side hustle there. Now, if you are dairy-free, you can still make kefir. You would use a different type of kefir grain, and they're called water kefir grains. You can also order those from the Kefir Lady in the link below. I don't work for her. I'm not connected with her in any way, except I've ordered grains from her multiple times, and she's just a really great person. And basically what you do to make water kefir is you do a very similar process, except you're using water and sugar. And you might be a little worried about all the added sugar, but remember, those bacteria and yeast are eating the sugar. That's their food. And so the sugar content goes down as it ferments. Outside of that, it's a very similar process. You just strain out the water kefir and set up your new one for the next day. And that's it. Besides drinking the kefir, you can use it to ferment all kinds of things, which we'll be talking about in later videos in this series. If you're going to be traveling or away from home for a while, don't fret, you don't need to pack your kefir grains with you to keep them alive. Just cover them in milk or in the water and sugar if you're doing water kefir, and put it in the fridge. Do keep the top off, like with the paper towel like I have. The bacteria and yeast go dormant at that temperature, so they're going to be fermenting and eating that lactose or the sugar very slowly, so they'll be fine for even up to a couple of weeks just leaving that in the fridge. Then when you come back, I would go ahead and strain that milk. I wouldn't drink it and then just start again with fermenting for the next day. Have a great week, everyone, and remember, to everyone who's new to blending, you're going to do great.